Class is now in session. I'm Professor Hockey, and today we will be discussing a bit of Sharks news. Obviously, there hasn't really been much to talk about from the San Jose Sharks camp because they were not one of the 24 teams to make it to the play-in/playoff picture here. So, besides just a few rumors circulating, there hasn't really been anything concrete that has happened until now. Today, the Sharks have announced that their head coach going into the next season will be Bob Boughner, so they are removing the interim tag from his title and keeping him on full time. An interesting choice, certainly. There were many other possible names to bring on, many bigger names that command a lot more respect in the NHL to try and go for. We saw the Capitals a couple weeks ago pick up one of those coaches, Peter Laviolette. But in the end, the Sharks decide to go with the familiarity, and we'll see if that ends up being something that pays off for them. Will they be able to get back to the Stanley Cup playoffs next season? Well, I'm not entirely sure. Let's now take a look at the differences between DeBoer and Boughner's coaching. How much of an uptick was it, or potentially even like a downtick, for the Sharks during this past season? Well, DeBoer coached the first 33 games of the season for the Sharks. He had a record of 15-16-2 with a 3.5 GAA, which goals against per game, which is awful, as well as a 2.7 goals for per game, which is decent, I guess you could say. Boughner then took over, played a few more games, or coached a few more games with 37. It's a bit of a worse record, 14-20-3, though the biggest change here for Boughner was the downtick in goals against per game, going from the 3.45, which is quite ugly, to the 3.03, which is still not great, but a bit more respectable. It also did include a bit of a drop in terms of goals for per game from 2.7 to 2.51, but one caveat, one asterisk here for Bob Boughner that we have to mention is the fact that as we got later on into the season, Sharks players started getting injured and started sort of just getting shut down for the year, and ended up being a pretty lost year, as we noticed in the last 10, 15, 20 games prior to the league shutting down. So Hurdle didn't play a good chunk of the year, Couture, Carlson, and most of these ended up happening under Boughner's watch. So hard to necessarily fault him all that much for losing in those games and losing games when a lot of the team was missing for a lot of the games he coached. Now, to wrap back onto why the Sharks may have actually decided to go with Boughner instead of bringing on a bigger name, obviously Gerard Gallant was a popular one that the Sharks maybe would have wanted. Sharks fans were looking to see, especially since the Golden Knights picked up former Sharks coach DeBoer. You would think that maybe the Sharks could go for something like that, or maybe even a more controversial choice like Mike Babcock. But one thing that should be mentioned here is, of course, the situation in the world going on right now, and the fact that all of these games currently being played in the playoffs are not going to be able to have fans in them. And even for the upcoming season, which will start sometime in probably December or January, around that time, it's possible that those games do not have fans in the stadium, and so it's a situation where a lot of teams are going to start having to cut back financially. We've already heard rumors of that being the case. I believe the salary cap is even stagnating here for a couple of years, and so you're in a situation where you're Hasso Plattner, the owner of the San Jose Sharks, and you can go with, a decent choice here with Bob Boughner, who has been with the team for a few years now. He did leave for a bit, but he ended up coming back, and probably pay him a meager sum of money, at least in comparison to someone else. Or you could be the Capitals and end up spending over $4 million on someone like Laviolette or Gallant or Babcock. So maybe this was just a situation where the Sharks wanted to cut corners a bit, save some money, save a couple of $1 million that maybe could go somewhere else in the team, or just sort of be an insurance type of money. And the Sharks decide to go for a bit of a cheaper coach. But in the end, I don't think this is a terrible choice. I don't know how much of a big deal the coaching is going to end up playing a part in. It seems as though, it's a bit up in the air how I suspect that the Sharks roster could do. It really is just going to depend on a lot of the players that are likely going to be here for next season, how they're going to perform, if they're going to bounce back, because it was a bit of a rough 1920, and of course we're hoping for a better 2021. Class dismissed.